welcome to another installment of the Fragments of Silicon Reviews. Up this week, 2 games. First is Echoes 3. Now, this is indeed the sequel to Echoes Plus, which, if you'll recall, was a part of a pair of games we reviewed last season. And that led us to interviewing the game creators, the people who developed the App Game Kit, which powers both permutations of Echoes, including Echoes 3 here. And Echoes 3 is definitely the most advanced showing of the App Game Kit to date. Echoes 3 here sports much higher production values than its predecessors. Also, we only have trailer footage because it's one of those. They only sent us one copy of the game. And I know we usually address price at the end of a review, but I feel like we need to bring it up at the beginning because it's one of the major differences between Echoes games. You know, there's no getting around the fact that the Echoes Plus game is a freeware game. Like, you can go right now and play it without any monetary investment. And the same cannot be said for Echoes 3. Like, and you might, and I suppose the central question here is that price justified? That's kind of a hard one to answer. Because while the previous Echoes Plus was a freeware game, it's also, it was also pretty simple in terms of its presentation and whatnot. Like, Echoes 3 is also clocking in at $10. And I will say, in terms of, in the graphics and whatnot, you can see where the money's going. Like, it's substantially improved in terms of graphics, not just in terms of the quality, but it's in 3D now. Like, we are seeing full 3D models and stuff. So just on those parameters, I'd say, yeah, it makes sense for this to be a paid product. Whether or not it's worth $10, that's a bit of an, because in terms of like modes, actual modes.
Yeah, there's a difference worth some money and worth a certain amount of money.
Yeah. It's like, well, here's the thing. It's got less modes than the previous iteration, but it's got more levels. Like, it's got more arenas, if I'm recalling correctly. It's been a while since we did the Echoes Plus review, so might be misremembering that just a touch. But, and it's also worth noting that Echoes 3 does bring something new to the table. Like, I will say that the core gameplay is still, is actually a twin-stick shooter this time. That's another thing I want to say Echoes Plus didn't offer full controller support. I definitely remember using mouse and keyboard for that one. But as far as Echoes 3's go, that's a bit of a mouthful there. As far as this one goes, an Xbox controller worked fantastically. Typical twin stick shooter setup. In fact, you move with the right stick. You move with the left stick and you shoot with the right stick. Like, the base gameplay here isn't going to win any originality awards. It still plays like Geometry Wars met Asteroids. It's just its aesthetical values are much more leaning towards Geometry Wars. I will say that is something that this iteration kind of lost, because the Echoes Plus did have things that aped the classic age of video games. You had your pseudo Asteroids board, for example. This is all techno neon infused stuff. once again, much like geometry. That's not necessarily bad, but if you missed having something evoking the golden age of video games, yeah, that's not here at present. I do not know if they're going to add to this game in the future, but what we got here, yeah, it's all neon brightness, and unfortunately, that also carries the problems with that kind of aesthetic.
Yeah,
I
even
don't
in
know
these
how.
stills, sometimes it looks like it can be. And I know with bullet hell, the whole point is you're supposed to try to look for spaces between things and focus on just the area around you and stuff that'll affect you later. But if you have like a background and all the bullets, sometimes it looks like it can be a little bit easy to get lost visually.
That's to say the least. Like once it gets up to the highest levels of a given area, you're like it's really visually busy, you know, and thus
I strain city.
what's more, you're going to lose track of your ship sometimes, which is once again, that's a problem inherent with the aesthetical values here, not just this game. Although I will say that does bleed into the biggest technical problem with with Echoes 3, and that is sometimes the game cannot handle all of the objects on screen.
Yeah, I'm more worried about there are actual background patterns here, and some of them are very similar in color to some of the stuff you need to actually be dodging.
Yeah. It's also sometimes the performance takes a nosedive because there's so many things on screen, or sometimes like the engine will desync with the visuals and take a bit to reorient your fighter. I died a couple of times due to that error. Anyway, in terms of returning mode, you've got the base mode, destroy everything and try to survive. You've got and to recap, this is kind of done. You don't have lives; you have an energy bar. Like so, taking a hit means taking damage. And this is important because one of the returning modes is survival mode, where you only have one hit. There's also speedrun mode, which is of course beat the level as fast as possible. And the new mode is, I believe they call it Big Bang mode. And what this entails is you only use bombs to destroy things.
Interesting.
Yeah, it actually changes up the gameplay quite a bit.
And these aren't infinite bombs, or are they like regenerating?
You have infinite bombs, but they're on a cooldown timer after you use each one. Yeah, so once you use a bomb, you have to wait a couple of seconds for the next one to show up. And yeah, once again, using that bomb on the higher levels of, I hesitate to say difficulty, but the higher levels of movement can be very tricky, especially as how isolating it can get at the top, at the top levels. Let's see. The soundtrack is once again pretty typical for this kind of game. It's all very techno, based sounds and music. Once again, if you've played a lot of twin stick shooters in this kind of vibe, it's gonna feel right at home. So that, that's about the overview of the game. And returning back to the central question, is this game worth $10? Ultimately, I'm gonna say no. I think this would have been better as a $5 game, but not for the reason you might be thinking. Like, not in terms because the previous one is free or whatever. It's more, this game's got some, it's more the technical hitches of Echoes 3 that kind of make it hard to recommend at $10 versus, say, Geometry Wars 3, which is not much more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
and it does. You said it has several stages in each mode, because I seem to recall the Echoes Plus didn't have a whole ton of progression in each mode.
I'm like, yeah, well, how it's laid out is, it might be hard to see, but the meter up on top, that shows your progression through a stage. And it will culminate in the solar system. These are what the stages are called. Sun going haywire and attacking you. You know,
which is basically a boss fight.
Yes. And that's either the end of the stage, or, you know,
transition
or the
point
culmination
for the...
or the culmination of your progress bar, depending on the mode.
And then when you're playing through it, it transitions smoothly between stages.
I'm like, that's the end of the stage. Like, the different stages are different selections. It can be hard. It can be hard to discern at first. Like you know, different arenas may be a better choice, because there's there's the easy field, there's 2 normal fields, and there are 2 hard fields. There's about 5, which is about on par, maybe a bit more than Echoes Plus.
Okay.
But once again, they're all hyper techno color fests. You know, you know, it's like, I think all of the arenas are shown in the screenshots, and you'll note they are pretty similar to each other in terms of how they look. The big difference is the color.
Okay, that makes sense. Still, it doesn't sound like quite as many as I was thinking it might be, so yeah.
Well, duly noted. You know, it's like... anyway, yeah, overall, $10 is a bit of a stretch to recommend. You know, it's a fine game on its own, but, you know, factoring everything in, it's a bit of a hard sell at $10.
So maybe check it out on sale, or if it's part of a bundle at some point.
That'd be my ultimate recommendation here. I mean, you know, even if you've played the free version, there's enough here that's new and different to warrant a recommendation on those merits. But, and also to justify a price tag on its own, because I'm pretty sure that the level of involvement of development here was an order of levels higher than Echoes Plus. You know, because once again, Echoes Plus was a pretty simple game. You know, this is, you know, maybe not ultra complicated. Like, once again, it's one of those. We would probably have to talk to Binary Zoo about the particulars of the development of the Echoes games. By the way, that is not a thing that is currently on Slate, to let you know. But this at a glance looks more involved than the previous iteration. Like, and yeah, that's about it on Echoes 3. You know, I really can't ask for any other opinions, because I was the only one who played this game. But thankfully, that is not the case with our second game of the evening, Quarter in Love, coming after the break.